السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين أما بعد. Today is our 8th and final session of this course of the thematic study of the prophets mentioned in the Holy Qur'an. We are today going to again look at 3 prophets of Allah, and I know and appreciate that we had to miss out many of the prophets due to the lack of time. And the theme that we will focus on is the theme of taqwa, which is the one that's associated with these 3 prophets of Allah. Taqwa, of course, as you know, is the view and the purpose of every believer's life. It is the notion that a believer has to act in a way in which they obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stay away from his disobedience. This notion of taqwa and the fact that these individuals were people of taqwa has been mentioned in the Holy Quran in a number of on a number of occasions. So we are referring to the stories of these 3 prophets who are mentioned in one particular surah, and of course are related with one another. And they are Zakaria, Yahya, and Isa alayhim salatu wassalam. The relationship between them is, of course, that Zakaria is the father of Yahya, and Zakaria is the uncle of Maryam alayhim salatu wassalam. In other words, the mother of Yahya and the mother of Maryam alayhim salam are sisters. Therefore, for these sessions, we mentioned the purpose of taqwa and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show the importance of this particular aspect of taqwa for both men and for women, because the mother of Maryam salamullahi alayha makes dua that this child that's in my womb, I'm going to dedicate the child to the service of God. And of course, when she's born, then she realizes that it is a female, it is a girl. However, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded for this female child, this lady, this girl, to be enacted and brought into the service of God as well. And she's been named as Maryam. And Maryam, of course, in the Aramaic and Hebrew that's used at that time means the servant of God. If we translate it to the Arabic meaning, it would be Abida, the one who does ibadah. Of course, her father had passed away whilst she was still in the womb, and before the birth of Maryam, so somebody to take care of her, to somebody to bring her up. Of course, as Zakaria was her uncle, her aunt's husband, he was the natural candidate to do so. But there were people in the temple who felt like that they wanted to be the ones who took this privilege or got this privilege rather than Zakaria. So they decided to cast lots. It's a very famous story, again mentioned in different riwayat and also in the Holy Qur'an, Surah Al Imran. And they drew the lots, and even after the lots were drawn, it was Zakaria salamullah alayh whose pen came out, and he was assigned with this responsibility. She remained, of course, in Bayt al-Muqaddas for this whole time under the care of Zakaria alayhi salam. And of course, where she stayed, she never left this place. She lived there all this time, serving the people within there. And on one occasion, of course, she would find that there would be fruits in her presence, even the ones which were not in accordance with that particular season. So in the winter, there would be fruits from the summer. In the summer, there would be fruits from the winter. And Zakaria asks her that, where is it that you got these from? And she says that it's from Allah. He is the one who gives sustenance to everyone without any hisab. At this moment in time, Zakaria, of course, who is a prophet, but he's reminded of the ultimate bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by this particular statement that she makes. And he prays. And at that time, he prays for something, again, that is seemingly impossible. We mentioned this previously in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. That he prays for a son, even though he's old. His wife has not given birth, she's also become old. But he knew that Ibrahim alayhi salam had prayed in his old age, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him Ismail and Ishaq when he was old. So when he could do it for Ibrahim alayhi salam, surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could do it for Zakaria as well. So he prays and he says, I've become old, but I've never been disappointed. This is the beginning of Surah Maryam. He says, I've never been disappointed when I pray to you. And I am afraid of what the people around me will do. These relatives who are around me, I'm scared of them. So grant me an heir, a warith, somebody who will inherit after me. And from Ali Yaqub, everything that's from Ali Yaqub, he will inherit that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, answers all the prayers of his successors, of his prophets. And Zakariya's prayer is also answered. Jibreel came to him and says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you good news of a son. Ismuhu Yahya lam naj'al min qabl as-samiyya. He's going to be called Yahya, and nobody before him has been given this name. And he's going to be the word of God. He'll be a leader. He will be a one who practices taqwa and the prophet for the righteous people. So now he asks, of course, even though he's prayed and he knows, but he asks that, how will I have a son when I've become old? My wife is barren. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reply comes that it will be as it is, because God does whatsoever he wishes to do. And of course, the verse after that is a reminder, just like the verse in Surah Yasin, that he is the one who created you before this when you were nothing. So it's very easy for him to create from somebody who's old. Just because this process of being old and not being able to have children is also from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he will break the rule, he will make the exception in order to prove the rule, that in normal circumstances, in ordinary circumstances, this is not possible. But in this situation, in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do it to prove the rule. So then he says that, give me a sign that this is going to happen to me. So he gives him a sign and he says that you will not be able to speak to anyone for 3 days except that you will do ishara, gestures. Zakaria comes down and he also, now he knows that he's not able to speak, and he will do only gestures. And this particular account has been corroborated in the Gospel of Luke as well. Gospel of Luke 1:18-20 mentions this particular part as well. Of course, due to the different theological understanding of prophets of God, the Gospels have presented this as something where, aliyadu billah, Zakaria was in doubt. But of course, we know that he is not in doubt in any shape or form. He only wants to know, due to the awe that he's feeling because of being blessed by this bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And during this next few days, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and due to this blessing and answering his prayer. And Jibreel taught him the names of the Holy Five. He told him the names of Muhammad and Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam. And Zakaria says to Jibreel, just as prophets prior had said to him, that Jibreel, when you tell me these four names, the name of Muhammad and the name of Ali and the name of Fatima and the name of Hassan, I feel joy and elation in my heart. But as soon as you mention the name of Hussein alayhi salam, I feel grief and sorrow in my heart. Why is this? As soon as you mention the name of Hussein alayhi salam, tears flow uncontrollably from my heart, and my heart becomes sorrowful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in reply to this, recounts to him the story of Karbala. Zakaria, when he hears this story, he spends this time in solitude and he weeps over Hussein alayhi salam. And he says that, "Oh Allah, this torment will come onto the best of your creatures, that Sayyidul Anbiya would go through such calamity that his son would be killed. You would afflict Fatima and Ali alayhim salam with this tribulation." So he says that, "Grant me a son as you promised me, and let him be the apple of my eye. And when you granted him to me, then instill his love in my heart. And when he is grown up, then make him shaheed and make me feel that torment that Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would feel when Hussein alayhi salam was killed." So in 6 months, Yahya alayhi salam is born. Now here there's 3 narrations that have been mentioned, that there are 2 individuals who are born after 6 months. One was Yahya and the other one was Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Some of the narrations mention that Jesus Christ alayhi salam was also born after 6 months. Anyway, we can do a Jumma of all of these narrations and say that all 3 of them were born after 6 months. And this, of course, was a miracle, particularly at that time. Even today, children which are born at 24 weeks usually do not survive. And of course, what is very interesting is the verse which is revealed both at the birth of Yahya and the birth of Isa alayhi salam, in which says, "May the peace of God, salam, be on the day that he was born, the day that he would die, and the day that he's raised back to life." And that's an important message from God. 2 times mentioned in Surah Maryam. First for Isa, for Yahya alayhi salam, and the second time for Isa alayhi salam. That there are 3 days in the life of a prophet which are important: the day that he's born, the day that he dies, and the day that he is brought back to life again. Of course, Maryam salamullah alayha is also in the temple. She's worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as per the command of her and the desire of her parents to do so. And of course, there's nobody in that chamber. Nobody's allowed to enter there. So she's very shocked when a handsome young man enters into her presence. And she says, "I seek protection from Allah, so stay away from me if you truly fear God." So he says, "I am a messenger of Allah who have been sent to you so that I can give you a son." So she asked, "How is it that I will have a son when no man has touched me? I have not done anything that is unchaste." So Jibreel, of course, replies and says that this is due to what God has desired and wants from you. And we will do this so that human beings will know the power and source of mercy and guided through this particular prophet of God. And so, of course, Jibreel breathed the life into her womb, and Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam was conceived. And at that time, she was given the good news from the angels that God has given you the good news of a kalima, of a word that has been created, who is the Masih, the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, who has been distinguished in this world and the hereafter, and those who are close to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there's some question regarding why he's been called the kalima, the word. Regarding that, of course, some of the Mufassirin of the Quran have written or said that due to the fact that just like Adam alayhi salam was created, kun fayakun, be, and he became. Similarly, Isa alayhi salam was also created in that way, symbolized by the command of God to be, and he became. And they called him Messiah because he was blessed and the source of much good. Of course, the Messiah means the anointed one, as you know, and it was used as a synonym for king because kings used to be anointed with the blessed oil. In other Mufassirin or other Mufassirin of the Quran have mentioned that Messiah is the one who is blessed, and therefore is a synonym for the word Mubarak, which has again been used in Surah Maryam, that he has made me Mubarak, blessed, aynama kunt, wherever I may be. So, and he will speak to people as he's in the cradle, and Allah will give him the Torah and the Injil, and he will be the messenger for the Bani Israel. So again, she had him in the womb for 6 months, and the time for coming to her birth, she came out of the temple and came to a distant place, Makan and Sharqiya, the Quran says. Regarding this, we have a multitude of narrations. Of course, you know that the Gospel of Luke, for example, mentions Bethlehem and other places. Of course, Bethlehem is not a very far place from Beit al-Muqaddas, it's very close. Whereas the ayat is saying that she reclined or went out to a further place or withdrew to a distant place. So the vast majority of narrations, volume number 14 of Behal Anwar, mention that she gives birth to Isa alayhi salatu salam on the banks of Euphrates, of River Furat. And some of the narrations particularly mention the land of Karbala, the place where Imam Hussain alayhi salam is buried. We have another narration, for example, where there's a dialogue between Imam Syed Zafar alayhi salam and the Christian monk, in which he also mentions that Isa alayhi salam was born on the land of Karbala, on the banks of Euphrates. And for this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability to cure people who are sick, because this is the land where the dust of this land has shifa within it due to Imam Hussain's blessing. So there, of course, she was in this desert land where there's no people, no buildings, no shelter, and there's only a palm tree there. So she came towards the palm tree and sat underneath the palm tree. And there she gave birth to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. The date that's mentioned in various different narrations is 25th of Dhul Qa'dah, which is the same date as the Dah wal Arth, the day when the earth was spread out, and also some narrations mention that this is the same day as the birth of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam as well. Now, when she gives birth, it is Jesus alayhi salam, who's just been born, who calls out and says that do not worry, the Lord has given you a spring which will flow at your feet, and shake this trunk and it would drop fresh dates upon you. Eat, drink, and be comforted. Surah Maryam again. As soon as he had spoken, she saw the water. She reached out and had the water, and then she shook the tree, and the dates came from that tree. Of course, in the meantime, Iblis is continually at work in order to try and counter the narrative. Iblis says that when he finds out that this child has been born miraculously, no father, he says, I would misguide 80% of the human beings through this child and be able to convince them of falsehood because of this miraculous birth. Now, Maryam salam rises again with the baby in her hand, and Isa alayhi salam speaks once again and says that if you see anyone, say that I have made a vow to remain silent and I will not speak to anyone at all. As easily as Allah had carried her to the land of Karbala, He carries her back, and now she's back in Jerusalem. When she comes there, then they see the child. They ask her that you have done something very strange. Your father was a good person, your mother was not an evil person. Where is it that you came with this child? She, of course, with her vow of not speaking, remained silent. She didn't say anything. When they all gathered around her, she just pointed towards the child. Now, of course, in any gathering, wherever something like this happens, and if somebody was to point towards the child, everybody would be very surprised. And they also say, how will the child in the cradle speak? But of course, he does speak. And he says that Inni Abdullah Atani al-Kitab wa ja'alani nabiyya. I am a prophet of Allah. I am a servant of His. He's given me a book and made me a prophet. And He's made me blessed wherever I may be. And He's exhorted me to pray and give charity and be good to my mother. And He has not made me a miserable tyrant. May God's peace be upon the day I was born, the day I will die, and the day I'm brought back to life again. Now they're silent. They're overwhelmed. They don't have any answers to this particular miraculous incident. Zakaria and Yahya, of course, are pleased to see the fulfillment of the prophecy, and others are disappointed. And Maryam salamullah alayha is exonerated in front of everyone. Now, after the miraculous words defending the chastity of his mother, Isa alayhi salam does not speak. Why? Because Yahya is the prophet before him. So Yahya is going to speak. Now Yahya is John the Baptist. Zakaria is, of course, the prophet. Zakaria preaches the message of God. Yahya is going to be the one who's going to testify about Jesus alayhi salam and preach the message of God. He has been made a prophet whilst he is very young. Some of the narrations mention that he's 3 years old when he's been ordained as the prophet of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him wise. He says, we gave him the prophethood when he was still a child. He would give them the message of God, warning them about the day of judgment and what had happened to Bani Israel before them. And then giving them the good news of the Messiah who was coming after him. For the first 7 years of his life, Maryam salamullah alayha and Isa alayhi salam, they lived in Iraq, in the place Masjid al-Balatha. Some of you may have had a chance to visit that place when you went for ziyarah. And some years also they lived in Egypt, where Jesus alayhi salam became 7 years of age. He was given the message of the messenger and Ulul Azm, and of course in this regard he was superior in rank to John the Baptist as well. He sent to Bani Israel, and his purpose is to guide them towards the knowledge and wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The law of Moses, the law of the Bani Israel is to be amended through Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And he's given the Injil, which is an updated text to the Torah which has come before it. And he's been given miracles to prove his prophethood. What are the miracles? He heals the sick and he raises people back to life. These are the miracles which are given. Imam al-Hadi is asked that why were the prophets given different miracles? So Imam replies that people are given, or prophets are given miracles in accordance with the wisdom of their time. Due to the time of Musa alayhi salam, magic was prevalent, therefore he was given a miracle which was the antithesis to magic. And due to the time of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, the prevalent or the prevalence of curing people was there. So he was given a miracle which was counter to not just curing those people who was impossible to cure, but even bringing people back to life again. And of course, the miracle at the time of the Prophet, or the prevalence at the time of the Prophet, was poetry, and therefore the Prophet was given the Holy Qur'an in order to counter that poetry. Now, as you mentioned, that the theme with both Yahya and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam is of taqwa, and both of them have been mentioned with this sifat and this quality of taqwa. So what is the sign of that? We have an example of one of that he says to his disciples that I treated the sick, I cured them by the idhn of Allah. I healed the blind, the leper by the idhn of Allah. I revived the dead also by the idhn, the permission of God. But I have not been able to cure the fool, the ahmaq. So they ask him, what do you mean by the fool? He says that I mean the one who admires himself and his own opinion and considers all obliged to him and himself obliged to go on. And he considers that all rights are due to him while he himself does not give any rights. Such is a fool for whom even I do not have any cure. And of course, one more story we quickly mention, and then inshallah we'll take some questions and we will conclude this matter, inshallah. This is lots of things to mention. That's this story of this very well-known story. Quickly, I'll mention it. That where one time Isa alayhi salam was passing through a place and there was a celebration going on. So they asked what's happening, and he was told that there's a wedding happening. So they're celebrating. So he says that today they're celebrating, but tomorrow they will cry. So his disciples ask, why? So he says that the lady in this house is going to die tonight. So the next day when they asked about the lady, they found out that she's still alive. And so they come and they say to Jesus alayhi salam, you told us the lady is going to die, but she's still alive. So they say, let's go to her and find out. So they went there and Jesus asked her husband for permission to speak to her. And he asked her, what did you do last night? So she said, I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Every Thursday, a particular beggar has been coming to our house, and we give him enough for the week for him to survive. Last night when he came, I was busy, and so was the family. He cried out, but nobody answered him. Finally, he had already left, so I covered myself. I went searching for him, and I gave him provisions. When Jesus alayhi salam heard her story, he asked her to rise up from the place where she was sitting. So she stood up. As soon as she stood up, she saw there was a snake that passed from underneath her. And he told her that because of this act of charity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala averted this death that was supposed to come to you from you. This is one of the examples of how charity or good deed to somebody can increase a person's life in such a way. Now quickly, we still have some time, quickly mention the shahadat of Yahya alayhi salam, and then inshallah we'll conclude. Shahadat of Yahya, of course, is that Jesus alayhi salam sent 12 of his disciples to preach to the people, and in order for them to see some of their barbaric and unethical practices. One of them was that uncles and nieces would marry. So the king in that land, when they went to preach, was in love with his niece. He wanted to marry her. And when they found out that this is what they're going to preach, they tried to act fast and before this prohibition came about. So she sent her daughter to seduce her uncle and coerce him to do whatever she wanted. The girl demanded that Yahya alayhi salam be killed in order for her to be married to her uncle. He protested, but she insisted, and due to the fact that he himself was also walad al-zina, in the end he conceded. When Yahya alayhi salam arrived in the city, the king summoned him. He slaughtered him with his own hands, and he placed the head on a golden platter for the new bride. Yahya's companions retrieved his body and his head and buried him, and the sky and earth mourned over his death for 40 days. Isa ﷺ missed Yahya dearly and often visited his grave. Once he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to revive him, bring him back to life. When he rose from the grave, they exchanged greetings and they embraced one another. Yahya asked, why did you revive him? And Isa ﷺ replies that I long to visit you and be comforted with your presence. So Yahya says to Isa ﷺ, I have not yet forgotten the pangs of death, and now you bring me back to life again so that I taste death again. And with this warning about the reality of death, Yahya bids farewell and re-enters into his grave. Of course, after this, Isa ﷺ himself is raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the heavens and kept alive for the greater purpose of bearing witness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the people about the coming of the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the end of time. And for this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept him alive for such a long time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us this humble offering of learning about our prophets, thematically those mentioned in the Holy Qur'an, some of them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reflect on their teachings and to be amongst those who learn from their stories and their wisdom, inshallah. If there are any questions, then we can take a few questions and then inshallah ta'ala will conclude the session for today, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid. I hope you're doing well. I have a quick question. So when you said that Prophet Isa alayhi salam was raised to the heavens, was that at the same, like, was Prophet Zakaria still alive then?
No, so the chronology is that Prophet Zakaria passes away, and then Prophet Yahya is the prophet, and Yahya and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam are obviously around the same time, and Yahya is killed during the time of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and of course Isa is then raised up to the heavens after that. So it's Zakaria and then Yahya and then Isa alayhi salatu wasalam.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If there's any more questions, then inshallah we'll take one or two more, and then inshallah we'll inshallah we do have a few minutes. I'll try to be brief today, inshallah. Okay, if there's no more questions, then inshallah we can conclude. Thank you, Jazakumullah khair jaza. We will try to continue the prophets that we left out after Safar, inshallah ta'ala. If there's more interest, we will let you know in due course. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that inshallah is beneficial. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.